Hi, I'm Brian McGeehan with Montana Angler. Today I want to take a few minutes to talk about fighting and landing big trout. Nothing's more heartbreaking when you're guiding than having one of your guests hook into a truly giant fish and lose it when maybe there was something we could have done to help keep that fish on the line and eventually get to the net. You can never bat 100% when you're fighting big fish. There's a reason they get big. A lot of them are going to get off. Don't beat yourself up. But there are some simple tricks you can do that will increase your probability of landing those fish. One of the first things you can do to increase your landing percentage on big trout starts with the hook placement on the hook set. If you hook a trout in the front of their mouth, these bigger fish are going to get into current and run down below you. And at that point, you're pulling the hook directly out of their mouth, and it's more likely to pull out. If you're able to get a corner hook set in the corner of their mouth, it's much more difficult for that hook to release while you're fighting them. The best way to get a better hook placement when you're fishing, a lot of times you're making an upstream cast while nymph fishing or dry fly fishing. When that trout takes, swing your rod tip in the downstream direction. That's going to take that hook and place it in the corner of their mouth versus if you lift the rod or lift the rod in the upstream direction where you're going to get a placement in the front of their mouth. So again, we're drifting. A fish hits, and we're going to set the rod downstream and pull that hook into the corner of their mouth for a better placement. One tip, if you're serious about landing big fish, is to invest in a decent reel. The modern reels are really great. They use a synthetic disc drag system, and that synthetic disc drag have a very low startup inertia, which means when that fish goes for that all-important first run, it's going to very smoothly engage versus sticking. And if a reel is going to stick right away, snap, that fish can be gone seconds into the fight. Unfortunately, I can't cue the big fish here, but I want to simulate our big fish with Johnny's stick here and use this to talk a little bit about the position of your rod while you're fighting a big trout. So you kind of want to get into a nice athletic position, have your shoulders square to the fish. That big fish is going to put a big bend in your fly rod. Now, when you feel the fish's head turn and start to run, especially if they're running out in the current, you want to drop that rod angle a little bit. That's going to reduce some pressure. You get less friction in the guides, and that big fish may pull off your drag. So keeping your rod at a nice 45-degree base position, the butt here is what we want to look at. We want to tilt it slightly forward. That's your sort of default position of the rod. When the big fish runs hard, you can drop the rod. Sometimes we want to actually aggressively lift the rod. As that fish gets closer and closer and begins to get tired, we want to get the fish's head to the surface. Once it's at the surface, even if they swim hard, they're just propelling themselves to the surface where we want them to net them. So once the fish is within about 15 feet of my position, I want to go with a very aggressive angle, maybe even tilt the rod tip back. That's going to lift that fish's head to the surface in a good netting position. When you're out fishing in water that has big fish potential, treat every fish like a big fish. I can't tell you how many times when I've been guiding where one of our guests has hooked a really monster fish, but the fish hasn't moved very much in the first couple seconds of the fight. This is very, very common for big fish, especially trophy brown trout. A lot of times those really big fish will get that hook set and they'll just sort of head shake a little bit. They'll glide a little bit. Sometimes folks think they're just hooked into a snag or a rock, or they'll feel the head shake and they'll think it's just a small fish gyrating. Assume every fish is really big until you have visual confirmation that it's not. Also, pay attention to where your line is. Generally, we have a little bit of free line. This can be a problem. It can snag around twigs. We can be stepping on it. When you hook a big fish, you want to immediately start to pay attention to that free line. Try to bring it into your reel. Avoid mistakes that can cost you the fish of a lifetime. My final tip for increasing your odds of landing big fish is to use a net worthy of a big trout. This net is way too big for 99% of the trout I catch, but I have had the good fortune of helping folks land fish 26, 27, 28-inch browns, and that big fish, if you try to hand land it or you try to land it with a net that's too small, is often when you lose that fish. So a big, broad basket on a net, worthy of the size of the fish, will come in handy. You don't need it very often, but when you do, you'll be very thankful you brought the big net. That's a good one.